Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sports Coverage channel. I am once again joined by Arunava Chaudhuri, and the man that we are going to discuss today is the man who has a way with words. I think it's safe to say. Gianni Infantino earlier announced once again that he has been become the president of FIFA. He ran unopposed, and in his press conference when he became the president again, he compared his ascension to FIFA Presidency in 2016 to the Rwandan genocide of 90s. So, like I said, he is a man of with a very interesting way with words. And when I was going through all of that in the afternoon, I thought today I feel curious. So I thought I'll reach out to Arnava and ask some questions that I have about the matter. So Arnava, welcome back once again, and let's just dive straight into it because I do have a lot of questions. I'm sure most of them are very silly, but my first one would be so he becomes a president again. Many people were already talking about this that he was going to become the president once again, but he was unopposed, and just I don't get it. Why? Why is he? And why was he unopposed? Why was no one else even offering like an opposition option, like especially from Europe, who are the biggest ones who were very worried about Infantino's stance in the global footballing scenario. They were not liking his antics, whatever he was coming out with verbally. So no opposition. Why is that?
Anshuman, there are two issues or two core topics here to look at why Gianni Infantino is the man that he is and then the position that he is. If people remember, he came in after the whole scandal surrounding Sepp Blatter and other high officials at FIFA, and with investigations by American authorities, by Swiss authorities, by other authorities as well. And Gianni Infantino had, at UEFA as its Secretary General, built a very robust commercial model, club and international football, to grow the European game. He's come to FIFA. He has turned a little bit his back on Europe and has said to the rest of the world, I will help you to become bigger, better in football. And which is something also which Sepp Blatter did, not to forget. And one of the biggest beneficiaries of the support of the incumbent and the last FIFA president is India. I remember in 2007 in South Africa that Sepp Blatter, coined that phrase of saying the sleeping giant. And the problem that Infantino has, or I think it's not a problem for him, but again, I think the others see him as a problem, is that especially Western and Northern Europe are not happy with Infantino because Infantino looks at football and he doesn't look at politics. Before the Ukraine war, Vladimir Putin was his friend. He doesn't have a problem with the Chinese. Autocrats are not an issue. It is about growing the global game. On the other side, also playing a political game in the regard to helping countries come together. Something that the United States and United Nations have not been able to do. Infantino has been able to do via football and via FIFA World Cup, is bring the Saudis and the Qataris together. So he does see himself as sort of this global leader in not only the football space, but also in the political space. And, again, as much as people in Europe don't want to give him credit and talk about, of course, expansion of tournaments and other things, but you have to give him that credit that he has a standing in Asia, in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Central South America, because he is trying to help football around the world. Of course, it is misused by people, so let's not kid ourselves, by the presidents, by the secretaries, and other officials within football systems. But he is trying to grow the game outside of its traditional home. And this is something we saw when we spoke about Qatar last year, that has sort of made him a friend of the world. And if you forget Europe and you look at the rest of the world, FIFA has 211 members. You can still easily win and stay in power. If you look at Asia, if you look at Africa, and just look at the Caribbean, take even South and Central America with it. Forget sort of say Canada, the USA, and Western and Northern Europe, who sort of are rebelling. And that's why also, again, the question was asked to the German FA in the last few days. The German FA decided in the end not to vote for Infantino, but they were asked, why are you not with the others working together in trying to put up a candidate? I think they wanted to avoid that embarrassment of a candidate potentially getting 50 to 20 votes, while the rest of the world actually stands behind Gianni Infantino.
Right, but does this not create a problem for the European nations in the long term? Because I think this idea for FIFA presidents to look outside of Europe to gather all that support has become quite has been something that has been very crucial for the presidents, especially when you look at the one country one vote policy, because of why we have political powers developing in especially in a FIFA context. We have political powers in Africa. We have in the Caribbean with the whole issues that we have had with Jack Warner, Chuck Blazer in the past as well, and all the recent issues. I think we have gone with Motsepe as well. So this is something that precedes Gianni Infantino, because before him this was an issue for Sepp Blatter as well.
And Anshuman, let me correct that, because we talk of Africa, we talk of the Caribbean, we talk even talk India, Pakistan. We cannot take it out of on this whole context. The Germans have had a problem with their FA. The FA in England, huge problem. Again, the biggest problem is that the FA and the Premier League are not willing to accept that they have a racial problem issue of people with brown skin like us. There is an issue over there. And about the French, who recently, the president had to resign because of sexual allegations of, brinkmanship, this, that, everything. The head coach had to resign in France. So these problems exist in national sporting bodies, irrespective of where you are. You've had scandals in America with that doctor in gymnastics. So it does not matter where you go. Sports administration, sadly, has an issue very often. And again, there is no one who's going to be wholly clean. Everyone has their issues. But if someone does something good, even a small thing, then I'd say that's a good step forward.
Right.
Sorry, I stopped your point. Yeah.
Yeah. So the point I was getting at, that this Infantino has this issue that Europe feels that Infantino does not have their interest at heart. Sepp Blatter faced this issue as well. Dr. João Valanche before him faced this issue as well. So Europe has not put front a candidate of their own for a while. And I get the argument that you don't want to put forward a candidate that gets absolutely embarrassed at the elections for very obvious reasons. But in not putting forward an alternative to Infantino, is Europe not creating a problem for itself, insofar as if even the rest of the world, if let's say they have an issue with Infantino and his rhetoric, but they are seeing that there isn't an alternative to him, does this not create a problem for Europe and everyone else who wants someone else other than Infantino, because they look at him and they just see a continuation of Blatter and the corruption that was associated with his term at the helm of FIFA presidency?
As tried to explain, I think Europe wanting to try to take the high ground morally, societally, and whatever, to me doesn't work. I think that's a big problem for them. And the point here is of course football. Yes, when we look at club football, it is driven by the big five leagues, by the Champions League, and all of that. But people in our parts of the world, I'm here in Germany, in this part of the world, forget that football is the only global sport, that football is played anywhere and everywhere in the world. And this one country, one vote thing is what other system will you derive? Because so what's the logic? Okay, because you're successful in football, you'll get more votes, or are you going to go by size? Because then China and India have the most votes in a FIFA context. What is going to be the logic? And it's not just a FIFA thing; it's the same thing with the IOC and all other sporting bodies. And at the moment, you see discussions regarding in fencing, the Russians are being allowed back. I was shocked today to see that. I didn't realize it. I've read it earlier, but I today realized that the SAF Women's Championship under 17 are being held in Bangladesh with support from UEFA, and the invited team is Russia. Who comes up with this, right? So therefore, all of this is there. There's an organizational front. There's a governance issue in there. But at the end of the day, if you see that the way Sepp Blatter did, FIFA was broke when Blatter took over. FIFA did not have any money. He made it commercially viable and successful. Before that, the Brazilians literally were milking the system. Corruption, there is corruption, no doubt about it. But on the other side, there's quite a bit of good work that FIFA and football does around the world. And I think that should not be forgotten. And I think that is something that there are a lot of people who work within FIFA who are not part of the political side of things. Again, the political side of things are problems, but the people who work within FIFA, who work also within other sporting bodies, be it AFC, be it UEFA, CONCACAF, whatever, even within an Indian context, within the AFF or within the state association, there are a lot of people who do the work, who actually try and help football to grow, football to thrive, to enable kids to play the sport, women to play the sport, to be an inclusive sport. And that is very, very often forgotten. And therefore, again, you made that comparison with which Infantino made about himself and Rwanda. I mean, remember the FIFA World Cup, just before the FIFA World Cup comparison, saying, I'm today Qatari, I'm Arab, I'm gay, I'm this, I'm that. He likes to do that. So, but again, on the other side, commercially, FIFA is as successful as never before. But on the other side, yes, there is this discussion happening of how much football is good. There is an European context, but there's a global context because the rest of the world wants to interact in football. And how do you create those mechanisms? If Europe does not want to be part of that, then most probably, again, there's this topic which was discussed today called the FIFA World Series. Some of these competitions might happen without the Europeans taking part. So therefore, that's an interesting thing, that there is a certain shift. You see how much of interest Cristiano Ronaldo's transfer to Saudi Arabia, to Al Nassr has created, or how much buzz. Al Nassr's TV rights were sold globally. We're talking about the Saudi League, a team from Saudi Arabia. So we see the strength of football. And I think in the long term, it is going to shift to some extent to other parts of the world. I think the Americans have done a brilliant job with the MLS. I was yesterday talking to someone in Canada about the Canadian Premier League and what they're doing. They're just expanding the league by one team. We see what's happening with the Indian Super League and other leagues as well. So therefore, football is a global game, and very often that is forgotten. Of course, there are certain values. There are questions of human rights, democracies, and all that things. But again, is that something that works? Because then the question remains, who do you keep in and who do you potentially throw out? Now, you have done it to the Russians to some extent, but actually it's not being enforced. If they're able to play in the SAF Under-17 Women's Championship, they're playing the Central Asian Championship with the senior team in a few months. What are you going to do, let's say, with Iran? What are you going to do with other countries who are at war or genocide? Syria, I don't know. So therefore, all of these things, it's a very, very complex thing. And on one side, as again, I think that FIFA does a lot of good work, and one should talk about it. But again, on the political side, as anything and anywhere, any area where politics involved, it's very, very complex, and there are no easy answers.
Right. So we brushed upon this before, and I will bring this back as a question, because whatever we think of Infantino, he is now re-elected. He is now going to be FIFA president for at least 2027. So, and we are already seeing the kind of things that he's proposing and the kind of things that are already in the pipeline. So we know that the 32-team FIFA Club World Cup is coming. We now know that the FIFA World Cup of 2026 the Men's World Cup has been expanded to a 104-game tournament where there will be 12 groups of 4 teams. There will be even more football being milked out of the players. So those are the two things that are already happening. And we have with just lost my train of thought. Okay. So yeah, so he talked about this. I think at the start of the World Cup last year, that why not why won't we invite North Korea if they want to do something with the rest of the world globally? So again, we talk about the fact that for better or worse, he has interesting ideas in his mind. Football, he is expanding football in a way that FIFA gets a bigger slice of the pie. When they look at UEFA do have a lot of money from the commercial might of the European clubs and the European and the UEFA Champions League, and FIFA is looking at it and saying that basically we want some of this as well. So over the course of next 5 years, this is a two-way question. Over the course of next 5 years until 2027, What direction do you think Infantino will take FIFA and by extension global football towards? And how much will it affect India at all? Like having Gianni Infantino on the helm at the helm of FIFA, how much does that affect India, or is it irrelevant as to who sits on the FIFA president seat as far as India is concerned over the next 5 6 years?
I think if you see what happened last year, that when India was suspended, that FIFA gave India a lot of time. India should have been suspended much earlier if FIFA went by the rule books. Then you know that FIFA and AFC have tried to help India to stay out of trouble. But again, our authorities, be it the government, be it the courts, be it their involvement, till date have not understood, sadly, that how a sporting body needs to be aligned to the rules and regulations of the country, as well as the rules and regulations and the governance of sport. So that's one. The second thing is I think India is getting much more support. The FIFA Forward Program 2.0 is something. 3.0 is going to come. So if India is going to get the support, is getting the support on a financial basis, on a technical basis, on a basis of administration. So we are one of those beneficiaries, and as we are one of the biggest countries, or we're the second biggest country in the world, India is going to get a lot of support from that front. Of course, with the AFF saying that we no longer want in the short to mid-term organize big competitions. Otherwise, maybe Infantino would have been speaking to India about potentially hosting maybe an under-20 men's or under-20 women's World Cup. That might have been something that he might be talking about. But they will try and see how they can integrate India more into the global scheme of things. Again, the 48 World Cup in 2026 might be coming a little too early, depending on how the qualifiers really work in Asia. But again, I mean, with 2030, maybe 2034, at youth level, I think we have certain opportunities. The support will be there, and that's very, very good to see, because one should not forget that the old dispensation of the AFF was very, very close to FIFA and the AFC, but both of them have stayed close to India, even under the new leadership.
Right. So, in general, you mean that Gianni Infantino being at the helm would mean India's relationship with FIFA will become warmer in general.
It is warm. It's not. It hasn't cooled. It is warm, and we are getting the help and the support that we need, even more than sometimes what we deserve, most probably. But India is an interesting and exciting market. Again, you and I know how much of potential there is in Indian football. I think we do not enough to enhance that potential. But again, I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And again, FIFA will, not only FIFA, but that's why I mentioned it again. AFC are trying to help India as much as possible.
All right. So right now, Gianni Infantino has emerged as FIFA president unopposed. No, but despite Europe in general saying that they are not really liking his rhetoric, they weren't able to put up a candidate. Is there a possibility for a candidate to emerge in 2027 when he stands for election again? Might it be from Europe? Might it be from somewhere else? Can you see anything emerging from this point onwards?
I think a lot depends on the 2026 World Cup, that in the US, Canada, and Mexico, and if FIFA financially grows even further, strengthen itself further, it can hand out more money to its member associations. And Infantino's grip today is much more than it was a few years ago. So therefore, I would think that he can strengthen himself and try to change certain things which will not be in the interest of UEFA and the European clubs, but he's looking at a more global approach, and again, how do I strengthen football in Asia and Africa, as I said, Caribbean, Central and South America, and not leave it to be just Eurocentric. And I think that is something that's a danger I think that Europe does see, and but again, from a FIFA perspective, if I was working with Europe, and if I was not really bothering about the rest of the world, I cannot win an election also. That has to be realistic. UEFA has 54 members. Yeah, you have 211, so the maths are relatively easy. So if you have Asia, Africa, the Caribbean on your side, um, any other candidate who's going to try and stand has no chance. And therefore, if you have these countries on your side and you say to them and you tell them that, you listen, I'm going to try and support you as much as possible with the FIFA fast forward program. FIFA has shifted its sort of member association office from Zurich to Paris, a separate division with a lot of focus on Africa and Asia. He's doing the right things to promote football globally, and that is, yeah, that's not to the liking of the Europeans.
Right. So we come back to the Europeans, and because they one thing that when we talk about the Eurocentrism aspect of it all, one thing that keeps coming back to my mind is the fact that quite a lot of European countries, including Germany, wanted to highlight the fact that Qatar is a country where being a part of the LGBTQ plus community is essentially illegal, and the whole one love armband campaign that FIFA at the last moment denied them. And I know that in the aftermath, the Athletic reported that the Danish Football Union was even considering a potential walkout from FIFA. So all of this made me contemplate a question because uh, when I think of FIFA, if I do not have this wrong, one of the reasons FIFA has emerged as one of the most powerful organizations over the last 40, 50 years was because of Sepp Blatter being very good at striking up deals with Adidas and Coca-Cola, making them synonymous with football itself, and then growing FIFA's commercial might, but also because FIFA and its founding members in the early 20th century had this idea that they wanted to walk away from the rhetoric of Olympic amateurism. And by 1920, late 1920s, they were like, we cannot really call football amateur, and we are very professionalized unions. We are going to have professionalized football played out, and that's how the 1930 World Cup came to be. And there is all of this in the aspect that Europe played a very crucial part in FIFA becoming what it was in its early stages and all through this time. But at the end of the day, FIFA, as much as it might consider itself the central point of the entire footballing scenario, Europe might look at all of this, and Europe might look at all of this and think, even UEFA would think, look, we have the most money and we have most of the eyeballs, and whatever association we have going on with FIFA right now is not really in our favor, because like you pointed out, 54 member nations, we don't even have enough votes in our corner to be able to put up an opposition to someone who does not have our interests at heart. So could over the next 4 years, and we keep this in mind, the fact that FIFA is trying to have a bigger pie of football in general with the Club World Cup and the expanded Football World Cup, could there be a moment in near future, like a breaking point, in which the many European nations, prominent European nations, look to FIFA and say, you know what, we are out of here. We don't need your money. We do not need your association. We don't need to be a part of the FIFA World Cup. We just go and do our own thing. Could this be a thing? And I say this keeping in mind the fact that UEFA has been trying to warm up its relationships with the likes of CONCACAF and CONMEBOL, which is why La Finalissima was a thing last summer, which was essentially warming up of relations between CONMEBOL and UEFA. So could UEFA trigger something like this, in which it says, look, we are just walking away from FIFA, we are going to do our own thing. We have most of the eyeballs, we have most of the power, we have most of the commercial might, and we'll just make up and do our own thing, and FIFA will cease to exist in due time if we take away the one thing that makes it very rich, which is the popularity, which is the sport, which is the players, which are the clubs, which are the teams. So is there a potential breaking point arriving something in the near future, considering what we have already seen, including the fact that Denmark has reliably reportedly, has already contemplated the possibility of walking away from FIFA altogether?
There are two things, I think, that directly come to mind. One is the Nordic nations in Europe. We talk about Denmark, we talk about Norway, we talk about Sweden to some extent, and maybe even Finland. Have can threaten whatever they want. Even if Erling Haaland becomes now the biggest superstar of the next generation, they are not as big and as important as they would like us to believe. That's the first reality. The second one, UEFA is fighting in its own house with the European Super League in the background. Again, cropping up as a topic. And you saw before Qatar or in Qatar the protest that the Europeans were thinking of doing and then chickening out. And the Germans making a fool of themselves and the others actually chickening out of doing any kind of protest with the One Love armband. So therefore, I don't see Europe really taking a stand, because Infantino, as was Blatter in the past, are politically smart maneuverers. They know how to ensure their interests are taken care of, while they also ensure that the interest of football around the world is taken care of. That is something that we forget. And if I want to talk about human rights and other things, I need to clear up things in my own backyard. I cannot, as Europeans go around the world, we've got, of course, the empire and all those kind of stories cropping up again. Will you go and criticize the Americans because abortion is banned in certain states? Let's go to the basics, right? So therefore, criticizing Qatar, yeah, there are reasons to criticize Qatar, but am I willing to criticize the US? Or is the English FA going to accept that there is a bias and racism against people from South Asian backgrounds? Why is there no South Asian professional in the English game? Simple question. So clean up in your own backyard before you go around the world preaching. And that's what Infantino actually said. And a lot of my German friends were angry. And I said, listen, he's right. He's actually right in saying that. Clear up your own mess first before you preach others. And that's Infantino is a very good orator as well. Sometimes people think, doesn't make sense, but I think you have to read between the lines of what he's saying. He's a very, very smart man. He's a shrewd, he's cunning, he's clever. And this is something that has taken him to the highest post in football. He was, again, from the general secretary of UEFA to FIFA, is a massive, massive jump. And he's mastered the art of what he needs to do and what he doesn't have to do.
So when we say that the West does not have a moral high ground to stand on, we obviously know that, being Indians. And when at the start of the World Cup, Infantino comes out and says, look, this is hypocritical for you to say that to take the moral high ground. When he was talking about all of this, the thing that came to my mind at the time was, okay, that Europe and the West does not have a high ground. Absolutely, they don't have. But also, they don't need to, because there was a lot of Orientalism involved, still is involved when it comes to talking about nation states and even sports washing, and there is a lot of xenophobia involved, which I believe that needs to be dealt with a certain bit of nuance, because that kind of rhetoric very, very quickly becomes problematic. But a lot of the reportage that concerned Qatar's contemporary issues, the very present issues, the issues that actively made sure that thousands of people from our own country, our fellow countrymen, died in making of these stadiums. That is a point that I think one could make without having to, take any kind of moral high ground. Like I don't think Europe or any other country need to mount on a high horse, because one does not exist, in order to point out, look, what is happening in this country. This country is now being contextualized into the global game. We are talking about Qatar in a global sense, because and we are talking about a lot of issues in your own house, because you have decided that you want to trade with the rest of the world, you want to work with the rest of the world, and you are hosting the World Cup. So it is a journalistic responsibility on our part, not a moral high ground taking, because we don't have one. If I'm a European journalist, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, look, we don't have a moral high ground. But just because things have been bad in our backyard does not mean we don't report on what has been happening in Qatar.
You are right on that point. Again, then the first point of contact would have to be then the government of India, the government of Pakistan, of Bangladesh, or Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
The South Asian governments don't care about their own citizens. There was the German investigation which literally asked the Nepali government and said, do you know how many people have died who are Nepali? And they didn't even have a figure. So again, yes, there are issues that need to be addressed, and it's not just a Qatar issue. It was highlighted due to the World Cup. It is an issue generally in the Middle East. So So if you want to become political, if I go back to the UK context, in this whole a few weeks ago, or last week, it was whole Gary Lineker issue with the BBC, where
Yeah.
another former player and a good friend, John Barnes, then said that it is quite funny that Gary Lineker was openly allowed sitting in Qatar to criticize the Qataris, but he's not allowed to criticize our own government with their own policies. So
Yep.
that is where we stand again, and that is something where football, you in the problem in today's world, you cannot keep politics out of anything. I think the strength of sports has been that it has tried to keep politics out of it. But you've had the boycott of 1980 Moscow Olympics. You've had the boycott of the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. But sports has been sort of a thing that is that has been able to bind people. Just think, in 2012, Ukraine was a co-host of the Euros. 2018, the World Cup happened in Russia. The Olympics happened over there. And that's the danger do we have. And again, football is a thing that we love. That's why we are talking about it at the moment, in this late hour. And it's a difficult one. And there is no simple answer to this. And the problems will not be solved. Again, we have to live in reality. It doesn't matter if it's politics or if it's sports. There are certain realities that we have to live in the year 2023 with. But again, also, despite all of those realities that we could discuss and talk about, you also do have to, on the other side, mention, and that is very often forgotten, what of good work that an organization like FIFA is doing, despite all the corruption and political whatever is happening in the background. But again, they are doing good work. And I also say, I know a lot of people within FIFA, and I know these guys, they work their hearts out for this organization.
Right. So that's all the question I had on Infantino. Any closing remarks on your end?
Yeah, first of all, if Mr. Infantino is watching this by any chance, congratulations on your re-election. And let's hope that FIFA tries, at least on the social aspect, on the growth of football, does the things that they've been doing. They have more money to spend, so that's good. And hopefully that money is utilized in a proper way around the world, and less corruption eats up these funds which are there to grow the game.
Right. So that's the time we have today, people, and we will come back very soon with another discussion. And till then, goodbye and take care.